Welcome to Mental Disabilities and the Criminal Justice System. I'm Elizabeth Kelley. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, and I have a nationwide practice specializing in representing people with mental disabilities. On mental disabilities and the criminal justice system, we provide information and hope to people with mental disabilities ensnared in the criminal justice system, as well as to their families. Today, we will have a conversation with two people from Red Oak Recovery in North Carolina, Carol Rose, the outreach specialist, and Lynn Wadsworth, the director of clinical operations. Thank you both for joining.
Thank you. Appreciate
Lynn,
being here.
Lynn, let's start with you.
Okay.
What is Red Oak Recovery and who is the typical client?
Okay, Red Oak Recovery is a dual diagnosis treatment facility within a residential setting, and we have been open for about a little over 8 years. We have 3 different programs within our company, 2 young adult programs, a young adult male identified program and a young adult female identified program. And then we have an adolescent male identified program. This is the 3rd program.
Lynn,
Yeah.
I want to break down a couple of the terms you used.
Okay.
First of all, dual diagnosis and young adults.
Okay. So dual diagnosis means that there is a substance use disorder diagnosis in addition to a mental health diagnosis. And that mental health diagnosis can be anything in the DSM.
And if when you say diagnosis, do you mean that a potential client will have had to have gone to a doctor or some expert and have a piece of paper that says he or she definitely has X, or can that diagnosis be based on the observations of friends and families as well as the potential client?
Yes, the latter for sure. That diagnosis is based on the information that we gather during the application process with the family or the client. Yes.
And we'll talk about the application process a little bit more with Carol. But that being said, Carol, how did Red Oak come into being?
Well, I love this story. I've been with Red Oak for a little over 7 years now. And that's one of the very first things that I remember learning about Red Oak. So my founder, Jack Klein, was walking through the woods with a friend, and they were trying to decide on this name, Red Oak. And the root system for the red oak tree is very strong and can weather a lot of pretty significant wind and other natural disasters. And so it represents, I think, metaphorically, who our clients will start to become rooted and can learn to manage whatever kind of storm comes their way.
That's a beautiful story. And if I may ask, did Mr. Klein have someone in his family who had a history of mental illnesses or substance abuse problems?
Yeah, I would say that he is someone who is in recovery.
Okay.
And I think that's how he ended up. He's also a clinician, but that's how he ended up in the industry and had worked in other dual diagnosis facilities prior to starting Red Oak.
That's a powerful perspective. Carol, let's switch back to you. We alluded to the application process earlier. How exactly does a family get in touch with you? And what are some of the components and the landmarks in the application process?
So, families can reach out directly through, our toll-free number, which is on the website, redoakrecovery.com, or the willows at redoak.com, or Foothills. at redoak.com. And so there's a toll-free number there. Certainly my name and number are readily shared with families. And I feel passionate about working with the families in particular because I have a family member who has struggled with substance use and know full well what these families are going through. So we talk a little bit. I'm trying to ascertain how the acuity of some of their issues are, if they maybe need to be hospitalized prior to coming to us. Just looking at all kinds of presenting issues that this young man or young woman has experienced in their life, and ruling out some of the more acute types of mental health issues, some behavioral issues such as violence, and then having a conversation about what makes our programming a good fit for this particular client. Sometimes it isn't. Could be age, it could be financial, could be acuity and mental health issues. There's a whole slew of reasons why, but there's a conversation always at the beginning, and looking at the financial piece, and then the application is found online, and once it's submitted, admissions is all over it, and within an hour to 2 hours post submission, the admissions team is getting back with that family to let them know about that application and whether it's been clinically and medically approved.
That's remarkably efficient. You mentioned the financial component a couple of times. Roughly speaking, what is the cost? And secondly, how can a family pay for this?
Okay. So what I like to try to do with families is help them understand the nuances around insurance. So I'll answer your first question rather quickly in the sense of what it is, the cost of at Red Oak. So we bill our families for all of their clinical, their son and daughter's clinical work. It's very robust. Each client is getting 6 hours of different groups therapy through each day, seeing their primary therapist individually 2 to 3 hours a week. They're also working with their case manager on recovery management an hour a week. So that's all billed to insurance, and that's what insurance is covering. We are in network with most Blue Cross plans, Aetna and Humana. And so those providers will pay for that clinical. What it will not pay for is lodging and food. And so that is the family is required to pay that. And it's usually around $15,000 a month to pay for that food, lodging, and adventure programming on the weekends, which I didn't say is also part of their time with us. So they're out camping and hiking and fly fishing and doing nature-based adventure activities. So if I could just expand a little bit on beyond just what our pricing is.
Most certainly.
I think it's really important for families to do their homework and to understand, as I do, I want to use my insurance, but insurance often dictates treatment. And one of the things I've always appreciated about Red Oak is that they individuate a client's needs for what they're presenting with. We don't use a cookie cutter approach. And so, if you've got a female, she may need to just be with females. If she's or he is presenting with more mental health issues, being able to individuate those kinds of that programming and treatment around that client, to me, is very valuable. I learned from my personal experience that treatment will drop pretty quickly based on medical necessity. And so you might get maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks at the most paid for. And then you're done, typically 30 days. We're longer term, 60 to 90 days. So it doesn't allow for the client to really get to the crux of what's going on, typically trauma and attachment based issues. And what I learned from my personal experience was that after 2 weeks, my family member's treatment changed. And so they were only going to pay for 1 trauma group a day rather than 2. And that group had 35 people in it, and it was men and women. And I thought, well, that really defeats the whole purpose of her going.
Well, and as you mentioned earlier, that type of mixed gender therapy can often be counterproductive.
Correct.
for people.
Correct.
And if a family is going through the experience of having a loved one in the throes of dealing with mental health and substance abuse issues, the last thing they should have to worry about is navigating their insurance.
Correct.
Lynn, I want to bounce back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Carol briefly mentioned a variety of different outdoor activities that Red Oak has. What's the importance of exercise and nature to Red Oak's curricula?
So, in addition to the adventure activities that Carol was mentioning, we also, during the week, all of our clients have yoga classes, and acupuncturist who comes in. And we also have shiatsu, which is an acupressure type of intervention. So we have these other holistic modalities that they're involved in. And, you know, there are probably, and it's kind of layered with adventure activities. Adventure activities on the surface level seems like it's a great way to have sober fun and to learn to have sober fun and to discover some new activities that you like to do. We have clients who come in and they've never done rock climbing and they discover they love rock climbing, or they've never done horseback riding and they go horseback riding for the first time and discover they really love that. So on the surface, it's a fun, and you're learning how to have sober fun, which I think has been something that we've focused on in treatment programs for years. On a deeper level, all of those activities, particularly out in nature, are addressing nervous system activation, which is really a huge component of our program, is understanding that most of our clients arrive to treatment with a fairly activated nervous system because of trauma or other kinds of stressors and crises that they've been going through prior to coming to us. And those kinds of, being in nature, number one, is very soothing to the nervous system. It's why people go hiking and camping. And, I always joke that it's why people play golf. They think that
Sure.
but really they like to be outside, because nature is very soothing to the nervous system. So that's a deeper level. And then there's also a level of connecting with peers and, having these kind of what we call peak experiences with peers who are struggling with the same disorders that you're struggling with. And so it creates a lot of bonding and community.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think it's so important to emphasize to families and other people that facilities like Red Oak are not just nature camps. There
Right.
is a definite reason for the activity, the setting, and all of the components that give Red Oak its special identity. I want to focus in a little bit more on the potential clients. If, for instance, someone has a past criminal conviction or perhaps a pending criminal conviction, are they automatically barred from admission? This is to both of you.
Carol, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I would say the short answer is no. We have had clients that have had felonies for auto theft, DUIs, several of those kinds of things. What we're looking for is beyond the actual charge and or conviction is how was it associated with substance use? If it was a brawl of some kind of simple assault, is that played out historically, or is this kind of a one-time incident? So we're looking at all of those nuances that created that particular issue to begin with. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense. And I would imagine that this is where your individualized application assessment comes into play.
Correct.
In other words, you try and find that, or you try and verify that the person is more than the criminal conviction or the criminal charge. Yes. Lynn, is there anything that you'd like to add to this?
Just that we have case managers in our programs who work very collaboratively with probation officers or attorneys or whoever the person has, working on their case or managing their case. That's a legal situation. And we can offer as much support in that area as is needed.
All right. And I should tell our listeners, a few years ago, I had the privilege of visiting Red Oak, visiting both the facility for young men as well as young women, and it is absolutely extraordinary. And as a criminal defense lawyer, I would feel absolutely comfortable referring the right client to Red Oak. But I should say that if the potential client is basically a city kid, maybe the thought of going to the hills of North Carolina seems a little alien. But by the same token, the potential client and the family should keep an open mind, because as both Carol as well as Lynn explained, that setting and the outdoor component is integral to Red Oak's mission and its success. Final question for both of you.
Mm-hmm.
If the family of someone with a mental disability facing a criminal charge is seeking advice and counsel from you, what advice and counsel would you have to give to them? Let's start with you, Lynn.
So, I think that where I start with folks, because I'm a clinician, I always start with trying to understand what's prompting the call at that moment, really understanding, what are some of the precipitating events or what has maybe the last year looked like. So really trying to understand the patterns. Sometimes a family will call and their child, quote unquote child, is 18 years old and they're having their first incident involving substances, but they're not necessarily needing our level of treatment, which is, higher end kind of residential treatment. So first trying to assess and understand what the situation is. And through that process, I'm going to probably do a fair amount of psychoeducation with them around substance use and mental health issues and what treatment looks like. So that's where I'm going to start with someone, is helping them understand. I try not to assume that folks know what mental health and substance use treatment is. So I'm wanting to give them a pretty expansive view and understanding of that, and what we offer in particular.
All right, great perspective. And Carol, let's hear from you.
I would recommend that the families get that assessment so that they can get the necessary help that they need. I think it's going to speak volumes from the court's perspective if that young man or that young lady is seeking help maybe has already gone to treatment, or maybe he or she is involved in some type of intensive outpatient, whatever that might look like. It will speak volumes for them in their recovery, as well as for the legal issues that they're looking at.
Sure. It will not only help that person in question, but for want of a better phrase, it will probably help their legal case.
Yep.
That being said, Lynn and Carol, thanks so much for joining me. And more importantly, thank you for all the wonderful work that you and your colleagues at Red Oak do.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Back at you. Yes, thank you.